This is a topic that pretty much every time we kind of talk about it to a lot of people, it's like, what is inclusive workplaces about? What are neurodiverse workplaces about? So we've got this really great set of experts, pretty much from diverse backgrounds, starting with Monika, who operates flex spaces all over India. Janak from CBRE, literally the expert on workplaces and the type of workplaces. We have Shivani from NOP. She drives diversity, equity, and inclusion in NOP as well. She's a general manager there. Ritu is a real estate director from Boeing. She's building a really beautiful campus as we speak, right? And Veena here is an inclusive consultant. So what is that? I thought we should be looking at this, right? Diversity, inclusion, belonging. What the hell does that mean? And let me just move that. So, we've heard of ADA, American Disabilities Act, but do we know about Universal Workplace Guidelines? Universal Workplace Guidelines is something that was coined together by this man here, Ronald Mace. What happened is he literally looked at ADA and he said, hey, I'm not exclusive, I'm not different, I'm one of you guys. So you gotta treat me like one of y'all. So that's what inclusive and universal workplace guidelines that he formulated is about. He literally talked about it, kind of formulated a whole lot of guidelines, and I'm hoping to kind of jump into this a little more deeper because it's very important for us to understand what exactly this is about. I'll just go back, sorry. So for a start here, I think I'm just going to throw this at Veena because she's like a PhD. She's done 5 years of study about what this is. So it's like really important for us to understand a little bit from her on this. Veena, if you can just kind of throw some light, because we know about Ronald Mace, we know about Universal Workplace Guidelines, but what does that mean in India?
Yes, thank you, Fancy. So I strongly believe no one is perfect. Each one of us as human being, we experiences, unique experiences, our challenges are different. So either it is a part of physical or cognitive abilities or disabilities. So these all form under diverse fabric of human being. So with this note, I would take 10 minutes, maximum 7 to 8 minutes of crash course on history of universal design. So when you talk about universal design or inclusive design or barrier-free design, the concept, the terminology is started in 1950. So the countries like Japan, from a global context, UK and US, they wanted to give a solution to the physical disability context, and they have started with barrier-free design. So from 1950 to 1970, there are a lot of movements took place in different regions, how we can give solution to the persons with disability in terms of giving solution as a user experiences or accessible design. So here, the various movements took place in different regions, and much importance was given to the visual impaired, where majority of them was projecting visual impaired, whether to add them as a special guidelines for the design for the visual impaired in terms of technology. So then web accessibility context came into the picture. So in 1970, the concept was more on Clarkson and Coleman. These are the two architects. They wanted to experience whether we can have an inclusive design from a UK context. So they wanted to understand how is our users having experience. If you see SAP, they have 10 years of autism. So where they have nearing 4% of their employment from for the autism, PWD. So similar way, if you consider some of the organization, if they have a range of diversity workforce, it could be considering the generation cohorts, it could be LGBTQ, or it could be disability inclusion. What is the percentage of pattern they have for employment? So considering that, your design and inclusive design should be more from user experience context. So then, from 1974 to 1990, the movement was started from Indian context also. So ADA was given a context of accessible design considering public entity as well as private entity. So when ADA came into the force with the compliances, so there are 4 aspects which was covered: public places, transportation and mobility, workplaces considering physical environment and technology, and product and services, miscellaneous services, whether all of these are accessible for all. So with that context, in 1997, the Ronald Macy and Goldsmith, these are the 2 architects, they were survived polio, and they thought that they had a difficult interaction to interact with the society for the public places and any of their transactions relating to the environment. So they proposed there should be a universal design. We don't want us to treat us as a special abled person. We want equity. So with that context, the universal principle came into the picture. So we have various guidelines from then till now considering the disability. So from 1950 to 1970, there were 7 disabilities are listed and considered. And in ADA, there are 21 types of disabilities which is considered. So when we look at invisible disabilities, we have more than 50% invisible disabilities.
So I want to touch upon that for a second, right? Because if you take a population of 1 billion, 15% you can actually see disability. 85% is invisible. And that's very important for us to understand that there is something like that existing in workplaces.
Yes. And if you see from an Indian context, from 1987, the mental well-being was an influence, and from there, the movement started. So in 1990, we have Javed Abidi, who was considered as father for rights for persons with disability. He is the one who started movement in India for disability rights. He is a founder of National Employment for Persons with Disability. In 1995, he reached out to all the corporates. He said, you should start with an accessible approach of giving employment opportunities for PWD. Then the concept of contract workers came into the picture as a part of PW to the workplace. Then the scenario started. So from then, 2007, United Nations Conventions for Rights for Persons with Disability, they gave a report and convention has ratified that. And based on that, they've given, you can give a voices of your country as a first report to the United Nations. So in 2015, they have given this report of voices of PWD to the United Nations. Then we have 2016 RPWD Act. So 2016 to 2022, we have harmonized guidelines, universal the design guidelines, inclusive design guidelines.
Thank you, Veena.
Thank
you know, that's a lot to take in, and I really don't know how many of you actually know, but I would suggest you really kind of start diving a little more deeper into this. There's a lot of information online. But I'd like to go to Ritu. She's just building a campus right now as we speak. And Ritu, do you think, and what do you think an ideal approach to be able to implement something like this in a workplace, even if you're building it or not? What do you think the approach should be from somebody like you who's an end user?
So firstly, thank you, Pansy, for having me here. I would say everybody in the corporate real estate fraternity, especially people who are operating and managing this workspace, that's just one section of this fraternity. I would start from the people who even build and design these workspaces. They all need to behave like evangelists to be able to champion this change.
Exactly.
To what, Veena was saying, when I started my career, when we spoke about accessibility and inclusion, it was about women and gender diversity. And slowly we moved on to looking at people who are differently sexual orientations in the workspace. And today, there is a huge push in organizations to start looking at people who are not just challenged from their physical ability, but even from a mental well-being perspective. So we recognize as organizations that diversity of people in the workspace beyond the gender equation is very important to be successful as a business and to be sustainable as a business. It's not just always about your bottom lines. It's not always about your net promoter scores. So I think that's where we are from. If you ask me at Boeing, I think we look at this very seriously. I'm a leader of one of the business resource groups. Business resource groups are a very common strategy to have in a corporate environment to be able to build more awareness, advocacy towards inclusion, diversity. And one such BRG is what I'm leading as an effort for the Indian subcontinent. What we're trying to do is to see how we can make our infrastructure more phygital in nature, which means striking a right balance between the physical infrastructure and, of course, the digital piece as well.
Yeah, right.
You know, if you ask me web, when Veena was talking about web, I think the beauty of web applications is about their universality, right? Which means irrespective of your abilities, right? You should still be able to engage. And that's the beauty of the web accessibility, I think, which we are trying to bring in from a workspace perspective.
No, great points, Ritu. I'm going to kind of jump over you all the way down to Monika there.
Hi, Fancy. Hi, all.
So Monika is like a really large flex operator. And so for you, I just want to ask you, how do you ensure the needs and preferences of neurodiverse individuals, especially when the type of tenants coming to you are of a diverse nature? You really don't know who's coming. And then how do you kind of manage around that?
Right. So, like you correctly said, Fancy, we do not know who are we building the common spaces for. Of course, we do managed offices, so the internal design of the client is based on their specs, their culture, their requirement. And however, most of Ikeva's customer base is largely a lot of startups, well-funded startups and SMEs and fewer larger companies. For them, when they come with their requirements, it's really unfortunate that they don't even have an EHS checklist.
Yeah.
So what we do here is we actually work with them and say, hey, this is how we are working towards ensuring. And, partners like Janak's company and others, they also guide these occupiers. So we are talking about basic checklists sometimes for startups and SMEs. That doesn't happen. And then this is the next step, which is neurodivergent individuals who think differently, who react differently, whose productivity varies depending on the kind of light and the kind of colors and the kind of zones you're designing. So from common spaces, what we ensure that we do a lot of muted colors, something that's not very dark, your lights are not very dark. Also, like you say, universal design, as intuitive as it can be when it comes to accessing common spaces, some quiet spaces, some, places that are not technology enabled at all. With customers, we have conversations. One thing that we were talking about, as a brand, we tell customers, when you're designing your space, look at varied people that will come and occupy. Your team would be varied. So use something that works for all types of genders, all types of ages, and people who think differently. Look at meeting rooms that are not traditional meeting rooms. It boosts productivity. Ensure that your aisle spaces are enough, that you have enough safety guidelines. And these might sound very rudimentary to a lot of large occupiers, but believe me, this is something that we handle. And then conversations like, how do you ensure your basic checklists are done? And how, again, simple example, in design, in corporate plants, it brightens.
So I want to touch upon that a little bit, because a lot of times we tend to come across plants, it's biophilia. Let's put some artificial plants and get rid of that. I mean, can you just please tell us the importance of going for live plants versus artificial plants? Right?
So the idea is, and we're, as flex operators, and prior to us, a lot of sessions we've had where people are part of managed office spaces, enterprise operators, they're working with large and small, but large teams and helping them design offices. Obviously, we have our architects and interior designers in place, but there are a lot of also young companies. So it's, in a way, we become their guiding to tell them, hey, this is what you should look at.
So I'll give an example, Fancy. Sorry to jump
I
in.
knew you'd jump in,
I'll
so
give an
that's
example,
good.
and I'm just talking about that whole aspect of the young people versus the traditionalists or the older generation in the workspace. So, in Boeing, there's one very unique requirement, and I'm sure many of the other occupiers will have, is of these prayer rooms, because people believe in prayers, right? And especially in the Middle Eastern countries. And this problem statement was given to us here in India as well. Well, we took it to the next level when we speak about universal design, because we are a multi-regional country, right? And prayer room would mean very different for different faiths that people practice in the workspace. So we came up with a novel idea of doing a reflection room. And reflection is all about, you can go there and pray, you can meditate, you can take your frustration out on your manager without your manager being aware that you're taking your frustrations out. If you are somebody who's a neurodivergent person and wants to calm down or take a break, right? These are the spaces to go to. So that, for me, in our own sense, is a very great example of universal design, irrespective of all the diversity of people occupying, especially from the younger generation people coming in and the people who are from the older generation.
Right. Thanks for that, Ritu. So I'm going to jump to Janak, because he has a lot to share among these women.
He's made the group inclusive as well.
So, Janak, you are an advisory to end occupiers, right? And then there are some things that they typically come to you and say, as per our guidelines and this ESG that we have to follow, here are the things that we need. But is there something you think that you need to advise? Because a lot of times they really need a little more advice from you as an expert on the built space. So can you share some examples or, something like that?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for making this panel diverse. I
This was
appreciate
important, yeah. Thanks, Janak, for joining in the last minute.
I think as we move to a more equitable office environment, every occupier is evolving through its needs on sustainability, diversity, inclusion. And, there are clients who do not have basic EHS checklists, but that's fine. They're also evolving, and I'm sure the next time they go there, they'll, be better prepared. And I think everyone's gearing up to make everything a lot more equitable. I think from a diversity perspective, it's no longer gender. It's religion, it's personality. You've got introverts, extroverts. You need to factor that in. You need to factor in age. You need to factor in population of where people come from. There's so many factors, and I think it's evolving. I don't think we're going to ever reach a stable answer like we have for maybe design for tech firms versus design for banking firms, which is, I wouldn't say cookie cutter, but it's pretty laid out, and then you tweak it. I don't think over here we should ever be happy saying this is the best I've seen, because I think it'll keep evolving. When we're talking to occupiers, we're not asking them just about their space needs or their density needs. It's about how to create that ecosystem. And this is a very important element of that ecosystem. So every occupier, big, small, with strong ESG guidelines or evolving ESG guidelines, will want to go the extra mile. And just to give an example, we're working with somebody right now who basically wants to create an ecosystem for employees to what experience they get outside of the country. It's very difficult to do that, right? Because laws are different, laws are changing. And I think it all starts at the C-suite training level. So I think occupiers like Microsoft enforce a D&I training. New startups, and I keep having this conversation with a lot of people in this room, the new CXOs are, 10 years younger than me. I may not relate to them, they may not relate to me. But that one common factor of creating equitable workspaces is a common theme we're seeing across occupiers. It has to be tweaked from city to city, industry to industry, but more important, individual to individual. And we've seen a lot, and I said this slightly a short while ago, personalities. I don't think we pay attention to personalities when we're designing or advising. There are a lot, like you have the reflection room, right? You have an option to go there and yell and shout, but it's great to have it. people to get them to that room is not going to be the easiest thing. So positioning it in that manner is very critical. There's a very dear friend of mine sitting in the audience whose name I shall not take. But when they design some of their centers, they design it basis the gentry entering the building. They will design it keeping that in mind. So anybody walking in feels a lot more welcome than they would in maybe another center. So I think that customization and the ability to change goes a long way.
Yeah. Just want to add to that because pretty much a lot of times when you're retrofitting existing buildings, like trying to lease it out, the first thing they say is put a ramp on the side of the building. But that's actually giving them a side space to enter when everybody should be entering from the main space. So try and make it as equitable as possible.
And to that, I think a lot of buildings came up with ramp spaces and braille elevator buttons. No one monitors that. No one really even pays attention to it. It's there, it's great. But it's done more as a checkbox than with any intention behind it. And I think as we move forward, you'll see a lot of progressive development firms actually try and implement that. I'm sure when Boeing does its new facility, they'll ensure that it's used rather than just having a checkbox. And I know a lot of people, voice control elevators. When it came out during the pandemic, we all snickered because we all went touching the buttons. But none of us thought that if somebody in a wheelchair came into the elevator and they may not be able to reach a particular button, what happens over there? The braille's not helping over there. Right? So these are some things, absolutely. It's going to continuously evolve.
I think, just to add on to him, I think for me, I would say it's not a tick box activity because otherwise, how else do you bring equitable infrastructure, right? For me, the biggest feedback, if I'm the person who's building a workspace, would be when somebody who's, if I may say, differently abled, has come into the workspace and has told, wow, I loved it. I didn't face even a single challenge to get to where I had to into your building. For me, that feedback will be reassuring that in spite of doing these ramps, which are maybe on the side for known reasons to all of us why they're done on the side, but the person has still managed to reach the destination in the building without struggling. And you're right, I think Braille is not something that's taught as the first thing for people who are visually impaired. And in fact, they feel the alphabets, by the alphabets coming out like 3D lettering, right? So, and Braille now is being adapted in a very, very big way in the country. So for me, that feedback would mean that, yes, I did a good job. In spite of all of this, I've achieved what I wanted to.
And I know you're going to add saying it's a mandate.
Adding to the Ritu and Janak. So it is all about mindset and practice. So whether you have to create an inclusive experience for your stakeholders. So more than equity, you have to create an inclusive culture. It will start with leadership, representation from leadership. So whether we have representation, it could be for LGBTQ, it could be for disability inclusion. So it starts with leadership.
Exactly. Shivani, so coming to you, like you drive diversity, equity, and inclusion in Nucleus office parks, and there are some key must-dos you believe that you need to definitely drive in any organization, right? If you could share some of those, because we were talking, we had a conversation, and you had a lot of really valid points, which I thought would be great to hear right here.
So, of course, I'm...
Do you want?
So for any business to adopt the must-haves, from an ESG perspective, you have to look at the business side as well, right? And the interest from the leadership will come in if it's impacting your business. Of course, ESG is a must-have right now, but how is it that we can impact our business? And that's where, my profile right now is customer experience. Customer experience is successful. So there are two elements to it, right? One is behavioral, the other is physical. The behavioral element comes in from employee experience. Employee experience rolls back into the kind of values you have. So if we have values like collaboration or integrity, diversity, respect for each other, and it's taken seriously by the leadership and it's driven by the leadership, it will flow down through the HR. Now, in our company, for example, we have employee work groups wherein we casually call people and they share. There's a lot of knowledge sharing. There are a lot of case study sharing. If there is a concern that comes up saying that someone's not feeling good, and it's a safe space. We know that if someone is expressing their discomfort about something, it will be addressed. It's a safe space and they will not be named about it. Taking our cues from there, we create a sensitivity workshop. A sensitivity workshop is critical across, like Janak said, gender, age, and it could be, I would say even Delhi-Bombay debate, for example, could be very, it could hurt someone. How are you talking about people from different regions? So it's not just about physical ability or disability or the way you look or where you come from. It is how are you making everyone feel comfortable. The third must-have, I feel, is are you trying to build leadership roles from the neurodiverse groups? The moment you're able to build or create a program where you're saying that, okay, I will develop this group into a leadership role, automatically the view of the rest of the teams, that changes, because they know eventually they might be reporting into one of the leaders, which is a neurodivergent leader. I think these are a couple of handful, and you can start small. You don't have to do, like 20 points, so to speak. Start small. So that's on the behavioral aspect. On the physical aspect, and again, Janak mentioned, and so did Monika. So Nucleus office parks, usually, and it's a part of Blackstone, takes up built buildings. They buy built buildings and then they upgrade the buildings. In the process of upgradation, we take care, are there enough open spaces? So for example, in one of the buildings, there was a junkyard, and we converted that into a beautiful green space where a lot of people can go. In fact, one of my clients, she said, post-COVID, she said, one of my team members wants to pray. Is there a space within the building? Because we don't have space in our office. And I could happily offer a couple of nooks and corners that we had created for people to just go, sit, relax, take a walk, and feel comfortable, especially in a place like Mumbai where space is a constraint. And we've managed to create those spaces from various nooks and corners. The other is, how are you collaborating with your partners? So whether it's and you say we have amenities, are you collaborating with the gym operator to probably create just 10-minute capsules? Instead of just pumping iron, can you create a 10-minute capsule for someone who wants to get fit but has some sort of a mental hang-up or is physically not able to really work out in a traditional format? Can we work with them? Can we work with creche, for example? Why do we have to wait for a forum like this?
Exactly.
To get into a corporate, understand what ESG is all about, get into neurodiversity, and then at probably in your 30s and 40s, learn, oh yeah, I need to, be aware about this aspect. Why can't we start small? When kids are in their very young age, in their founding years, why can't we drive sensitivity at that age? Right. So that is something that we've started working on, and of course, like Janak said, there is enough and more to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Just want to add to something Shivani said. So, there's been a lot of conversations of what co-working and flex operators say about building a community. And I know a lot of office parks also do that for the occupiers. So while there's the physical space, there's something that we do, which is obviously to engage our customer base. And some initiatives that we've also taken to ensure that at least aspects of participation from various, or even awareness, instead of celebrating Holi, the traditional way of playing with colors. In Hyderabad centers, what we did, we invited a spokesperson from this large group called LV Prasad, which is famous for the eye surgeries. And the doctor came and spoke about what visually impaired go through with colors and it was just sensitive. You can't, obviously, we are not culture heads for our occupiers, but it's just sometimes creating awareness. Or
it's important because a lot of times what happens is, I've come across a lot of clients who say, just get me color, it should be colorful, the interiors should be colorful. You got to kind of think beyond that to understand why we're doing what we're doing, what is this color, and what is that emotion that is associated with a red. Red throws a lot of people off, and that's something we just don't get, Yeah, totally understand.
I think the other thing we always forget, because I wear the operations hat as well, security services is another thing, right? When you walk into a very beautiful building, whether it's multi-tenant or a campus, and you have these big, sturdy men, with all the gadgets around them, standing there to check and frisk you, that can also be a very, very, limiting experience for many people who are trying to access.
That's so true.
And that's one aspect that we are trying to work on,
so
to see how we can make it more softer.
In Orbit Mall, and I give it to them, all the security personnel, women, nicely dressed, but feel a lot more comfortable, and they frisk men and women both. So again, I can't obviously have the perspective of how men feel there or other genders feel there.
Janak can add to that.
I feel a lot more comfortable going through a place where I'm not intimidated by the security personnel.
Right.
No, you're right. Because even at Nucleus office parks, we are hiring an outside agency which can train all customer-facing employees like the guard and housekeeping, etc., on how to be sensitive, especially to this group. While you're being firm, but you're also being polite. You're not putting off anyone. You're not scaring anyone off. And of course, we can't do that training. You have to have someone from outside to come and train them, sensitize them on. And it's an office park. People from varied backgrounds are going to be there, with very limited or exposure. So how is it that you're dealing with them is something that we're starting now in terms of training our customer-facing employees.
I have a question for you.
Wow, thanks.
Sorry, we turned the tables. But one of the things that we constantly grapple with is these universal washroom designs. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, see, I think the future is going to be one restroom for all, accessible, disabled toilets. It's like one for all, with a urinal somewhere else for you all to go to. But I think that's where we're headed, because we're not talking about two genders anymore. We're talking about how many? 5, 6, So that's where we're headed.
We are talking about equity. According to the norms, United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, by 2030, it is going to be a norm.
Yeah, exactly.
So now all of being an accessibility consultant, and we do various audit. So most of the workplaces, they reach out to us whether we can fill out the checkbox. What is a reasonable accommodation? So we are not looking at reasonable accommodation. We want it should happen right from the ideation stage. So which are the build environment? Yes, we can look for reasonable accommodation. But as we should not wait for the norm to happen, okay, then we will work on it. So by 2050, entire physical environment, if you look from, it should be accessible world, inclusive India, accessible India. That should be our mission.
That's absolutely right. I mean, what you're saying, because we get a lot of calls from a lot of our clients saying, hey, just tell us if we really should be doing this. Is this a mandate? Can you just tell me if it's a mandate? If it's a mandate, I'll do something about it. But I think you need to approach it a little differently. You got to do what is right? Yeah. So I just want to kind of 10 minutes, so that's good. I want to kind of go back to anyone here who can pick it up, right? Is there any way that you can go back to your tenants and actually kind of gather data to talk about, because I think that's going to be beneficial for this audience, for them to understand how do you gather data to try and put the learnings from that into creating a successful workplace, right?
Yeah, I'll just pick
Sure.
one point. So ESG is a big mandate for us. You've used the mandate, but it is extremely important for Blackstone, and it's percolating down to all the portfolio companies. We are looking at ways of not just what we can do under ESG, but how is it that we can collaborate with our occupiers. So for example, when I have a conversation with my occupier, I say, tell me what is it that you're doing under ESG? Can we do something together? You will be very surprised to say 100% hit rate, where each one of them has said, someone wants to put a solar panel, and I know this is a diverse thing, but I'm just bringing it up. The other one, there's one particular case where the MD says, Shivani, I have a 50% diverse group. However, the women in my company are not ambitious enough. You know, I don't have them aiming for a leadership role. What is it that you can do? Now, it's not a part of my KRA, right? But because we have that ingrained in our system, I'm saying, let me do a leadership talk with them. Let me give my own life examples. Let me get my friends who are successful women across industries. So he said, yeah, can you do this pan-India? You know, now their office is with us in Mumbai, but because we are connected, I'm happy to go to another developer's building and conduct the same training for him in Noida or anywhere we are not present. So that's the level of collaboration we are looking at with our occupiers. And trust me, whether it's an Aditya Birla or any client that we have, they're 100% committed. And there are clients who've come back to me saying, who are relatively young but very, very successful, saying that, you know, I know this is important, but I don't have an ESG plan in place. We're still figuring it out. I said, I have a report. Can I share that with you? Do you want us to sit in the meeting? Do you want us to collaborate with you or support you and tell you through our own examples and our learnings, what is it that you could do in your work environment? So these are just a couple of things that we are doing.
Yeah, thanks. So there is this thing that I think we really need to touch upon. Any of you can throw a light on any successful example or initiatives or programs that you've run with this particular, universal, something that you can share with this audience. Veena, have you been able to collect data from any of your tenants and clients that you can share with this audience?
Yes. We have taken voices from PWD. So based on the NOC, I cannot name the providers, but it could be from visual impaired or neurodiverse or cognitive disability. We are making that voices and we are writing recommendation. We are closely working with government and communities. So as we have informed, we have more of 21 listed disabilities. Even the color disability, when we have more on color reflection, that is not considered as disability. So we have 50% of the disabilities are invisible. So it is very difficult and challenge for the practitioners to consider what element of it to look into. So we understand as inclusion is a journey. So same thing when you look at the disability from 1970 till now, the pattern of disability in the autism, if you see, it is a spectrum. So every year we will have the innovative, it is very sad to say, but we have seen these different the kinds of disabilities. So how we can have a universal design when we are looking at considering all goods, your products, environment, technology, which is accessible for all. So that is the ultimate outcome of our universal design, whether your entire environment is accessible or accessible for all your providers.
Thanks. So I'm just going to go over from Monika, Janak, everyone. So when you have to think about the future of the workplace, okay, and somebody comes to you and says, what exactly do we need? When you think universal workplace and workplace, couple of things you can share in terms of either like a one word or a sentence so that, we take away from this that, this is definitely something we need to do. We need to talk about this word a lot more, neurodiverse workplaces. We need to talk about universal workplace as guidelines to be followed, because it seems like there's not enough people who know enough about it. And especially when you're talking to end users, we seem to be having a problem even discussing it because we're hitting a wall. So we'll start with you, Monika.
So the first is simple designs. Don't overcomplicate, but have diversity, like have options, something. Like Janak said, you might have a reflection room, but it'll be hard for people to use it. So have something else that the person who's a little more introverted may actually use. So have that option, but keep it simple.
Somebody mentioned this, and I was thinking about it. I think, Ritu, did you mention it? I think it has to come top down. It has to come from the leadership or from the CXO level to the rest of the employees. Because when they see their leaders doing it, they will start doing it. You can have simple designs, very important. You can have flexibility, nimbleness, whatever D&I initiatives. It has to come in equitable from top to down. Trainings are very important. Mandatory trainings are very important. I'm very proud to say the business I look after in Bombay, we've got more women realtors than men realtors. My grandmother was a realtor for 23 years, and I've seen her outperform her counterparts. But it comes from the leadership. If the leadership believes in it and truly believes in it, and I believe as we move forward, India is seeing a lot of emphasis at the leadership level on D&I. We will, I wouldn't say be the front runners, but we'll be right up there with the rest of the world leading this change.
Yeah, and not just a box of tech.
Quite similar to what Janak said, but I think what I would like to add on that is create a leadership development program for the neurodiverse audience. Keep training, sensitivity trainings across platforms, both for blue-collared as well as white-collared audience, and create a lot of green open spaces where this specific audience can feel welcomed, can feel one with nature, and comfortable, and can go back. In my opinion, I was just thinking, if it is inculcated in your bloodstream and in the culture of the company, imagine you have a window seat and there's a colleague of yours who feels suffocated, has problems, focusing. If he's not in an open space, will you give your seat to him? It has to get down to that level.
Agree, 100%.
I think all the points are covered. I would just say that. But I think advocacy is very important in my mind, Fancy. I think when you're talking constantly about building culture, what do you mean by culture? Culture is something which is in the DNA of every single, component of the organization. An organization is made by people. Processes and all of that come later, but people is the common denominator. So to build the culture, we need to constantly, because this is not an easy change to accept, adopt. So I think there is a lot of advocacy that one needs to do. Of course, leadership from the top is important, and making sure that not just the top, often we speak about the middle frozen, which is a very, very common terminology we all are conversant with. I think even looking at that middle level of leadership in an organization becomes important. So I might want my organization to be 15% neurodiverse, right? And I have 3-4 managers in my organization. If they are not aligned to this kind of thinking, my organization will never be neurodiverse because me as a leader wants it alone. So I think this needs to percolate into the further layers of the organization, especially the middle, which is often frozen.
Agree. Veena, last words?
Inclusion is a journey. So we have to walk the talk. It's all about mindset and practice. So we can make this happen. Thank you.
Okay, and so I think that's all we have, and well within time, 2 minutes. Thank you. Any questions? Because I think it's important. Yeah, there is.
Mic. Thank you. Can we get the mic quickly passed to the lady? And meanwhile, can we have a big round of applause for our entire panel?
Thank you. That was very insightful. As a business head and also as a woman in the real estate industry, I wanted to ask you, D&I, multiple dimensions of it, still remains a nice to have. It is not a business imperative right now with financial ROI. So how do you turn good intentions into pragmatic initiatives? How do you prioritize these inclusivity measures with the business heads?
So it's a very long journey, and there's no one answer fits all. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to address it, but I'll try. And that's how I started my first answer, is that eventually you have to look at the end customer experience. If the customer experience is great, he is eventually going to give you repeat business and hence the ROI. Customer experience comes from an employee experience. Focusing on employee experience in terms of, like Janak had, again, I keep quoting him, sorry. Can you break down the employee sets that you have? Not just men and women or age groups, etc. But can you actually look into personality? How is it that you're building that personality? Is there a questionnaire at the time of hiring? Is there a personality questionnaire that you're getting filled in? Army does that, right? And hence they have that, do you have it in you? Because they need a certain mindset to succeed, to be able to, when they're on the war front, what sort of mindset do you have? And then accordingly they hire. In a corporate segment, if you are able to tap on the strengths, depending on the kind of work areas that you have, it could be creative, it could be financial, it could be selling, etc. At the time of hiring, if you're able to identify, okay, this person fits in best with his or her strengths in, say, a creative space, automatically the level of creativity is going to go up. And if the level of creativity is going to go up, the client is going to be happy, the end result will lead into a business ROI. It's a very long cycle, but there is, like I said, this is not something that you can fix in a snap and say, this is the ready-made cookie cutter answer. There is a process, and you have to, if you genuinely mean to adopt ESG and diversity and inclusion in your company, the only way is to connect it back to the customer and your business.
Just to add two things here. So I was having a chat with Ramita in the afternoon, and she said, hey, people in her company do not go through a performance appraisal if they've not passed through that training and they've not gone through that sensitization. So one way to do it is you make it mandatory for your team in a manner that it is important to them. The other way around is, at least of all the people that here and are co-working operators or flex operators or space providers, the biggest thing that we do to our customers, give to our customers other than the physical infrastructures and experience. And when it is customer facing, if you do not, and it's very important for me to be cognizant about how the other person's reacting to me. I cannot provide great customer service if I'm not empathetic and I do not understand and tolerate diversity. And that's a direct impact to business. It's not an indirect impact anymore. Because how else, yes, there is space, this design, but there is human interaction. If you're not empathetic, you cannot handle diversity, you cannot provide service.
To add on, it is all about mindset, and sensitization session should happen. More session on unconscious biasness, more on self-awareness. So as we said, each leadership representation matters. So we have to start, and then in future way forward for strategic alliance also, they will look for disability inclusion, they will look for universal design, then it could be mergers, acquisition. So by 2030, 2050, if you see, it is all about not only looking from an equity perspective, equitable perspective, it is more about business imperative too.